I'm back in England. Shout out to the White Cliffs of Dover, etc. And like I'm way less completely fucking batshit crazy because I worked too much. Turns out you know when you have to be like on 100% for days in a row, it turns out that's hard, right? Like at 12-hour days and your girl don't mix. So like by the end we were like in hysterics at the end of every day because we just like couldn't handle anything. And yeah, so it was, it went the fun way because my coworkers are really wonderful people. But it would be like some poor French waitress just trying to get through the day, and three people who've like lost the ability to do any French at all, just being like, I don't know, man, please help me. Like it was a lot. It was emotional. It got emotional. So,
parlez-vous
fuck. Yeah, that was exactly food. We're just like pointing at menus and being on me just saying, pardon-nous, français terrible, like over and over. Actually, français horrible. Sorry, not terrible, because terrible actually means good, I guess. I don't fucking know. I don't know, bro.
Well, then why is it called Les Enfants Terribles? Why?
That's a great question. I don't fucking know. I don't know anymore, all right? I'm not sure I know anything anymore. I'll just tell you that. I'll just say that for the record. I'm not sure I've got a brain, but, fuck it, we ball. And, that's just like really where I am. Have you ever seen that chart and it's like the quadrants? It's like high energy, low energy, bad, good. And so like, fuck it, we ball is like high energy, bad things are happening. It's so over is low energy, bad things are happening. And then like we move is low energy, good things are happening. And we are so back is high energy, good things are happening.
Nice.
That's that. So I'm kind of in the fuck it, we ball quadrant now. Which is, it's fine. That's a fine place to be, I'm hoping to move towards we move, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. I've been cleaning out a garage, and man.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, we've lived here for a little while, and
oh no,
let the garage pile up, and we're getting to a point now where it's not a fucking disaster, but
it was.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was. Yeah. Just like throwing out so much shit. Yeah. Like taking. Like I took some donations in, and I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" I'm like, "Look, man, it's a little tent thing. My kid used to have. Just what?
Like I don't know.
What do you want me to tell you? Like Like I'm like, I know you sell shit like this, or like what are we doing here? Like, come on.
Don't get on my ass about this. I'm clearly in a very vulnerable and emotional state.
No, not me. I'm clearly in a very thank God I finally get to throw this stuff away. I have like sentimentality for a very, very, very small number of my daughter's things.
That's a skill to cultivate. Yeah.
Really, like. I don't know why, but like, I mean, there are some things like there's this like stuffed elephant we've had since we found out she was that my wife was pregnant. That was we bought for her, and like a few little toys and some outfits and stuff. But for the most part, I'm like, if she already has something like this, and she doesn't use this anymore, and we can't give it away to someone here, then we to like someone we know or someone in the neighborhood, then I might as well just take it down and donate it. And like Pete, yeah, but I'm just like, I fucking love trash day. Get this shit out of here.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of having all this shit. Like, I don't want it. Like, just get it as far away from me as possible.
No, I just think that is such a skill for life, and like it's one I've really had to cultivate moving around the world. I have like a low, but like you have to be so sentimental about things where I'm like, I just be throwing shit out because it's like, what? Like, can you put it in a suitcase and move it to another continent? Are you gonna? If not, but then also the annoying thing about like the immigration process is that like you have to be able to prove how long you were in places for ages. So I have like these fucking binders and binders full of like every single rental agreement we've ever had in London, and like, our old paper phone bills and bank statements from when that was a thing. And it's like, I think we can throw them out now, but you just never know when immigration is going to start fucking with you. And you'll need that, right? And so I'm just like, Jesus, I don't know, but I would love to get rid of them. Like, seriously, like my old fucking phone bill from Hackney in 2008. Like, yeah, like I've got that. I have my rental agreement from 2008, like I keep that motherfucking thing on me, right? And like, I don't want to. Just, I live in a 1-bedroom flat. I don't have time for this shit. Like, ugh. That was one of the best things about like things going digital for me, where I was just like, okay, well, if the government asks, I can log into my bank account and be like, here, bitch. Like, instead of having to like keep them in my closet. Paper fucking pay slips. My God.
Oh man. Yeah, I hate. I hate how much shit we have to, just keep around.
It's a dare toss of daily life, man. It's weighing upon us all. What can I say?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, should we talk about some weird shit? Because I'm hyped. I'm hyped on our question today, so I'm like, I'm gonna fucking force us to dwell on it for a while.
All right. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, the podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke Waters, and I'm an amateurish historian, and as always, I'm joined by Dr. Eleanor Yanniga, who is anything but. Today, we've got more weirdness in bite-sized chunks. But first, delicious. In a savory broth. They're coming in a savory broth or something, however you like
wonderful.
it. Fried, savory broth, sauteed, whatever, curried, I don't know, whatever you want. But before we get there to your the dish you've made up in your head, we have a question from our patron, White Trash Historian, who says, so this may not be in the right vein for a Patreon question, but this has been bugging me all day. Editor's note, this is in the right vein.
Oh my God, this is completely the fucking right vein. Oh my God.
How does land ownership work with inviting vampires in myths? Like, if you rent a space, can a landlord allow vampires in? If a vampire is a cop, can they enter with a warrant? Where does the line between you make a house a home, but someone else's home, but someone else owns that house apply?
This is the best question I've fucking ever heard in my life. Give White Trash Historian a fucking Pulitzer right now. I'm not sure I have the answer to this, but I want to talk about it. Okay, right?
Well, okay, let's start here, because what is the myth? Like, what is the myth with it? Like, you have to invite them into your house. I guess because it's the evil and you're inviting the evil in, or so, like, so what's the, like, why? What's the point? I mean, other than that being a weakness of theirs.
I mean, I think that this just kind of has to do with ideas of hospitality and things like that. And certainly I think that it's also a part of, the moral tale, right? Because vampires and vampirism is very much bound up with like ideas of sexuality. So, you're being penetrated, you're being sucked dry. There is
hate it.
Oh, God, I'm like, they've sucked me dry again. Damn.
They just won't stop sucking. He's using teeth. For the love of God, stop using your fucking
when
teeth.
when you already know, but he keeps sucking, etc. You know. So like there is absolutely this thing in there though where you know, all you have to do is look at Bram Stoker's Dracula in particular to see the threat of vampirism as being this kind of unbridled sexuality. So, you know, obviously the vampire myth goes back further than that, but so it is kind of like contingent upon this as well. So the idea with like the letting them in is again like opening yourself up to this kind of like sinfulness. So it's very much in the vein of kind of freedom of choice a little bit, you know, like the idea that sin exists in the world and blah, 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 because, you know, God's giving you a choice or whatever. So I think that it's linked to that, but it's also linked to like these conceptions of hospitality where, you know, a lot of, like the myths, like Strigoi myths and things like that, they are, you know, they come from the land of my people. Shout out Slovakia. You know, and we are a very hospitable people. Okay. You know, and so it's going to be kind of one of those. But it's also sort of about, are you inviting strangers in? And also it is still playing on power rules as well, because, you know, a lot of the time the vampires in question are, you know, the real bloodsuckers of the world, like lords. Right? Yeah. Lords and ladies and like highfalutin people. And so it's kind of calling into question your ability to say no to letting the landlord in, right? Like the actual literal landlord. Are you allowed to say no to them? And so it's kind of also playing with, again, that, you know, that kind of knife's edge thing where it's like, well, what are you allowed to say no to? What can you say no to in terms of sin? How is, you know, the very situation that we live our lives in opening us up to this? Right. So, yeah, it's kind of like saying, what can you say no to? What are you saying yes to readily? And so the hospitality is a good thing, you know, inviting people in and being welcoming is a necessary cultural good, especially in peasant societies. But it's also kind of like a warning for those who shall be warned about like what happens when you invite the wrong sort in.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know of any particular vampire stories that really make a that really use the like landlord tenant relationship as a plot
so
device.
Fucking good, dude.
Entering that is a really good, like just a really good idea for like a you know, for a thing where the guy's like, I didn't invite you in, and he's like, yeah, your landlord didn't. You're like, no. Yeah.
Well, the real vampires are the landlords. Am I right? Am I right?
They are.
Someone write this. Someone write this.
So maybe it's that instead of the vampire getting, getting permission from the tenant to enter their home, the vampire is just coming in anyway because they are the landlord. Are the landlord, and they do the same thing. You know, they are the cop. But I do got to say that like a vampire becoming a cop, like that's just like you're just.
That's like laying it on too thick.
Well, I mean, that's like you just have carte blanche to go nuts there. Like,
do you think so? Because I'm wondering if I feel like it doesn't work. Like, I think that you just because you have a warrant doesn't mean like you're not invited.
No, I just meant you have carte blanche to like.
Oh yeah, act like shit. Yeah,
just like you just prey on.
They'll be like, he fell on his own fangs, and
I'd be like, I don't know what happened with all these homeless that have been sucked dry of blood with fang marks on their neck. Who's to say?
Oh, we had him secured.
Like blah, blah. Why am I always being blamed? Blah.
We had him secured in the back of the police car, and he somehow managed to fall on his own fangs and exsanguinate himself. And sucked himself dry. Unfortunately, our dash cam video was turned off at the time. Yeah.
Yep. It's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate thing. Yeah. It's.
I don't think they can come in with a warrant.
No,
okay.
I don't.
Yeah. Like, I think a landlord can invite them in, and I think a landlord would. also. Although, you could do a good line in kind of like a horror comedy here where the landlord doesn't want to let the vampire in though because they lose the tenant and they're trying to suck them dry themselves. So
Yeah,
like, like a
true.
real parasite off.
Everybody's trying to suck the tenant dry, like a cop's trying to bleed him for info about something. The landlord's trying to suck them dry from the rent, and the vampire's literally just like, "Hey, man, I want your blood," and you got, you know, everywhere I look, somebody's just trying to fuck me up.
I feel like
Suck me dry.
oh yeah, and then the landlord will tip the vampire off when he knows the tenants are broke and they can't pay anymore, and he'll be like, "Fuck it."
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
kind of a
yeah.
symbiotic relationship, but there's like a tenuousness to it.
A reverse form of rent control.
Copyright,
Yeah,
we're not so different. 2024.
Yep. If I see any of this, you're all hearing from my lawyer.
Yeah.
About this.
That's Amy. We're gonna make her retrain in.
Oh
yeah,
jeez. Yeah.
Sorry, Amy.
Sorry. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer to this.
I think the
but it is a
landlord can
good
let him in.
idea.
I think the landlord can let him in, but I don't think cops can come in with a warrant. And this is what I'm coming down on. This is the vibe. It's the vibe.
Yeah. But I mean, if you need it for this work that we're talking about, it has to be like the landlord can't invite them in, or can only do it under very limited circumstances like that. Otherwise, you're just gonna you gotta punch it up a little bit to make it work with the person in the middle being pulled apart by all three sides.
The landlord has to be in the building. I feel like the landlord can't be like send them over like they're a plumber or something.
Yeah, the landlord has to be there and like unlock the door specifically or
Yes.
something. Yeah, something like that. Yep. Again, trademark, copyright,
That's us.
et cetera, et cetera. White Trash Historian, thank you very much for the question.
That's fucking real shit.
If you are the type of person that has other questions like this of the regular or mythological variety, please do subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/WNSDpod. All of these episodes are ad-free. You get bonus episodes. We got 60 of them. Access to the Patreon or to the Discord, and ask us questions like we said. It's all good fun. $5 a month. Check it out. Before we start, a note from last week. When discussing medieval Chinese inventions, I forgot to note that the earliest known restaurant menu was discovered in archaeological remains from the Song dynasty, which held power from the 10th century to the 13th. That means that the line, "looks like meat's back on the menu, boys," is something a medieval person could have conceivably said, and is a period accurate phrase for the medievalism of the film adaptation of The Two Towers. And if you would like...
I just wanted to also point out, because I did a big episode of Gone Medieval today about the history of distilling. Chinese people were also the first to be like, let's distill booze and drink it.
Hell yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Chinese people. Yeah.
Ancestors.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks guys. And if you want to hear us drill down more on Lord of the Rings, then sign up for the Patreon, because this Friday afternoon we have a really good one coming. We got a question from one of our patrons, and they ask us about saying this. It just sounds like the name of like an academic paper. It's just, they ask us about the European medievalist influences on modern day Japanese art. So, like Berserk, the manga Berserk,
Yes.
Video games like the Dark Souls series, Elden Ring, stuff like that, stuff like Attack on Titan and stuff like that. Like, how do these medievalist portrayals, where do they get their Western influences from? And so we're going to talk about that, and it's really cool.
Yep.
Unsurprisingly, there's a lot of Lord of the Rings in there, but also a lot of other cool stuff.
Dante, our boy Dante.
Dante definitely in there. We got a lot, and it's a lot of fun. I have a flow chart that I've drawn out. So things are going It's consumed my brain for a little while. So yeah, check out that on Friday. If you want to, $5, patreon.com, yada yada. You know the deal. All right. So we're back with part 6 of our weird medieval series, and folks, we're starting in the Americas. As we all know, getting a handle on the Americas in the Middle Ages is not an easy task. There's almost no written language to be found on either continent. Most of the historical and material records present before the arrival of Columbus were destroyed in the process of European colonization. And then there's 500 years of anti-indigenous historiography to sift through. However, tireless work over the centuries by historians and archaeologists and anthropologists and many others has revealed much of the truth about the goings-on of medieval indigenous Americans. We now know so much about the loose confederations of tribes that populated much of North America, like the mound-building people of the great city of Cahokia in modern-day Illinois, and the irrigation techniques of the trading hubs of the Hohokam in the American Southwest. We know much of the great empires of Central and South America, like the Maya, the Aztecs, and the Inca, which is who we're talking about today. Now look, we all know that empires are bad, but much like the Mongols or the Holy Roman Empire, they're also sometimes quite fascinating, which is maybe the best word to describe the Incan Empire. If any empire or nation state was ever an actual land of contrast, it's the Inca. It is, all at once, a very late, very brief medieval empire, having formed in 1438 and only lasting about 140 years, but is simultaneously the largest pre-Columbian empire in the Americas and easily the most geographically puzzling empire in human history. See, most contiguous land empires in history stretch horizontally, like the Mongols going from the Pacific to the Caucasus, or the United States going from the Atlantic to the Pacific. But the Inca could not expand that way due to the vast Andes Mountains keeping them hemmed in to the east. Thus, they came up with a novel solution. Who cares if you have to make use of 3 distinct climatic zones? Just build the damn thing from north to south, taking advantage of ingenious terrace farming techniques along the mountainside, oases created in the desert, in the Atacama Desert, by glacial meltwater and coastal resources. The Inca built an empire. Oh, and they also had a rigid class system, an entrenched nobility, and a peasant labor system similar to Francis Corvy's system, but had no concept of money or market systems, and the state provided land to the peasantry and had state-run grain storehouses everywhere, and they also appear to have had some level of gender equality in domestic gender roles below the upper echelon of rulers. As I said, a land of fucking contrast.
Land of contrasts.
Woo! And then we're going back to Europe to talk about 2 very weird dancing events. First, the Bal des Ardents. Ardents, I don't know, incident that happened in France in the late 14th century, and then the Dancing Plague, a social contagion / craze that spread across the continent for a few centuries. But first, before we get to that stuff, let's talk about the Inca. The Incan Empire, if you can't imagine it, just imagine the Pacific coast of South America, and yeah, it's part of that from, Peru all the way down to near Chile, I believe. And it's longer than the Japanese islands, and if you moved it up into North America, it would stretch from Nova Scotia to Jamaica. They had anywhere from 6 to 14 million inhabitants, and as I said, they stretch across 3 biomes: mountains, deserts, and coast. But really, I was doing some reading. I was listening to a podcast about some stuff in the indigenous Americas, and it got me thinking. It's like this society is so weird. Like it just looking at it from top to bottom is crazy. So their emperor, who was known as the Sapa Inca, was considered the son of the sun.
Yeah.
So a deity, and they had a noble class that was given special privileges and excused from various tasks. It's a very rigid class system that they have here. However, the survival of the Inca was predicated on terrace farming, a process which used the rugged terrain of the Andes to grow whatever could grow at that altitude, with terrace sections getting wider and having greater variety the further you went down in altitude. to maintain these terraces and the other farms and the coastal farms and stuff like that, peasant families were given land to farm on the date of their marriage, and additional land would be allotted to them by the state for the birth of children. And all of this was centrally planned from the original capital in Cusco. The homestead the married family would build would be theirs, but the only exception was that any food produced above what the family needed to live on must be put in the many state-run food storehouses that were scattered across the landscape. These stores of food were saved for times of need and doled out to all as needed in case of hardship. So that's really cool.
That's
right?
cool. Like that's cool.
We don't even have that now, and in most places that I know of. However, an additional tax was also levied on the peasants in the form of something akin to the French corvée system, wherein peasants would be called upon at various times to perform large government projects or fight in wars. And, that's not cool at all. In fact, it's described by some historians, in some cases, as just almost slavery, like being worked almost to death. Yeah. All terrace farming had to be accomplished by human hands and ingenuity because, all beasts of burden native to the Americas have been extinct for over 10,000 years by the time the Inca were around. Further down from the Andes was the second biome, which was the Atacama Desert, which is a barren wasteland that's so dry it's often compared to the surface of Mars for its lack of rainfall, and has been used as the surface of Mars in several movies. But glacial melt from the Andes does flow down in rushing rivers and streams that create narrow strips of green in the desert, where the Inca placed trading hubs and use these oases as small towns and stuff like that for people traveling between the two. Finally, those on the coast made use of marine resources, some of which were sent further inland to the rest of the empire. And this is where a lot of their what they would consider luxury goods came from. Things like shells and necklaces made of different things like pearls and stuff like that and everything.
Cool corals.
But also like the fish and everything, and they would subsist on the fish and send that inland to the deserts, and the deserts would subsist on that and what came down from the mountains. And combining all three of these together was just involved a huge amount of central planning. And it's about to get even weirder because there's a couple of other things here that make this way, way more impressive. So all of these cities were connected by hundreds of miles of streets paved with cobblestones, which were there to make foot travel faster because the wheel as a tool for large-scale anything was never invented by the Inca. They had small toys that had little wheels, but otherwise they didn't have it.
It's so interesting to me.
Yeah, I've read that they believe that one of the reasons for this is because they didn't have any beasts of burden. So
who's gonna pull it? Yeah,
the alpaca and the llama are not pulling the. Not pulling
our
the
homies
thing.
will carry a backpack for you, but they ain't gonna pull shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nope. And if you try to get on them, buddy, good luck with that.
I love my little homies. I love my little llama and alpaca homies. Hugely fucking in favor. Shout out to alpacas and llamas.
Yep. And another thing was that all messages were carried by word-of-mouth relay runners who relied on these things called cupus, which were devices with numerous knotted cords that the Inca used to remember incredibly long stories of pieces of data, as they had no writing.
I'm sorry, it's so fucking cool. It's so fucking cool.
Did all of this with no writing. They remembered. Cupus were used for this purpose across Incan society, but the ability to translate or decipher what the knots mean has since been lost to time. Oh, and as I said, they had literally no concept of money or markets whatsoever. They operated on systems of reciprocity trading where different resources and prized goods were appropriated, were either traded or appropriated and moved about according to the state's extensive central planning. So, you got that, but it gets even weirder because the gender roles of Incan society are another weird land of contrast. The current academic consensus appears to be that the Inca had a distinctly patriarchal society. The Sapa Inca was always a man. That appears to have had clear gender roles and expectations for both men and women, but only after marriage. And further, many of the tasks associated with these domestic gender roles were shared equally by the husband and the wife. For example, weaving and cooking were typically defined as women's work, while tilling the fields and dealing with livestock were defined as men's work. Obviously. However, there is pervasive evidence of men weaving and cooking across the empire, and women were observed to have worked the fields and tended livestock just as the men did. Because of how interconnected the Incan society was and the delicate ecosystem it had to navigate, marriage was seen as a central tenet of their society because the homesteads were necessary to feed both the family and everyone else in the empire. So it appears that regardless of how the gender roles were viewed in society, necessity and survival caused them to become blurred and fluid in actuality. Further, there is some evidence that the clearly demarcated domestic gender roles for married couples that have traditionally been ascribed to Incan society were actually developed much later in the empire's existence as a byproduct of contact with the Spanish after 1532. Oh, I'm almost done. Incan women also had rights and privileges which were almost wholly unique for this era. Between the ages of 14 to the mid-20s, men and women were both expected to engage in a folly period, wherein they lived at home, helped out in the homestead, and also freely engaged in casual sex and frivolity with one another before settling down and getting married sometime in their 20s. So that's a lot more than most women in the medieval era anywhere else in the world get. Also, women could inherit property and other assets in their own names from their mothers. But just to rub a little more salt in the wound, noblemen were allowed to have multiple wives, while peasant men were allowed only one. So, yeah, it's the tallest contiguous land empire ever that has a god king, a noble class, a peasantry oppressed by corvée labor that is no better than slavery in some cases, and had defined gender norms and expectations, yet they simultaneously had no concept of money, market economies, or private property, and all land was provided by allotment from the state according to the principles of central planning, and the property was to be operated for the betterment of all, with extra production placed in state-run storehouses. And also, women had some property rights, and there was limited sexual freedom for both men and women for a limited time. I'm not even making a joke anymore. It's just literally and figuratively a land of contrast.
It really is. It really is. I love them. You know, like they're just so cool to check out. Like, I mean, Empire bad, obviously, but the Empire that carves out a period of shagging for the people, that's excellent. You know, like they're like, they're like, these kids, they're gonna need to just like shag it out, or we're never getting anywhere.
Yep. To me, the central planning is something people have a difficult time with now, and they did it without writing and without just planning this stuff out for the whole thing and doling out these pieces of land and everything. And I mean, like it's something that would make the bureaucrats of medieval China and the civil service system proud. Like they would be proud of this level of state run. I don't know what the word is. Ingenuity.
Yeah. And I mean, I think also it's a really interesting thing to talk about because it shows us that ideas of tech sometimes are just incredibly skewed by the Afro-Eurasian experience, right? So we tend to say that you have to have writing, right? Like you have to have writing in order to be taken seriously, because if you can't write things down, and it's like, well, what if we invent a thing with knots? And then we can all just remember, and like, is that not a form of reading, right? Like, being able to see this and go, oh yeah, gotcha, cool. Like that is a type of tech, and it's one that we no longer are able to use. So I really enjoy seeing innovations like that because it really puts to bed kind of racist ways of talking about these societies where it's like, well, can you do this?
Yeah, I mean, we don't. We prize writing, and I mean, with good reason. Writing is great, and it's one of the primary things that allows us to know about the past in the first place, in the study of history at all. But like it, if you can manage a society of 14 million people, however many, if you can manage a society of like 100,000 people without writing, like, that is, insanely impressive, and impressive to the point that where like you have to step back and go like, okay, civilization maybe doesn't require writing, because like if you can manage this and you can do it at a point where like, to the point where you could keep this thing going for well over 100 years and fight off the Spanish for some time.
Quite some time, yeah.
It's not like that is like just so impressive on its own, and you get like, you add in all the other stuff, you add in the central planning, you add in like, like one of the most like just purely materialist societies that ever existed, because I mean they're clearly operating in a patriarchal way, a patriarchal milieu, but they have done away with certain parts of that as they needed to keep their society functioning. And they're just like, well, the nobles might have a lot, the nobles might have more than others or something like that, but we're going to give land to everyone, everybody's going to work it, and we're going to have this in case of bad storms or droughts, or it's like, otherwise, because if you don't do that, you don't have an empire.
No.
And they wanted one. So that's the Inca. They're really cool, and it's just maybe the weirdest empire to ever exist. Very fascinating, very interesting, and very confusing. But the next thing we're going to talk about is the Bal des Ardents, which happened on January 28th, 1393 in Paris. This event is described in much greater detail by Barbara Tuchman in The Distant Mirror, The Calamitous 14th Century, and was the inspiration for Edgar Allan Poe's short story, Hop Frog. I don't know any other way to talk about it other than just to briefly describe what happened and then ask Eleanor a bunch of questions. King Charles VI and 5 nobles performed as a dance troupe with the king in disguise and costumes that made them look like wood savages at a reception for the 3rd marriage of one of Queen Isabeau's ladies in waiting. Excuse me. The dance was apparently meant as entertainment and an underhanded diss at Isabeau's lady in waiting. The costumes they were wearing were made of linen, soaked in resin, and covered in flax to give them that real shaggy appearance, because these people cared about production values,
That's right.
it. As such, no open flames were permitted in the hall while the dance was happening. During the performance, however, the king's brother, the Duke of Orleans, Louis, came in with a lit torch, proceeding to accidentally light the dancers' costumes on fire from a stray ember. The king was only saved because his aunt knew that he was in disguise and used her voluminous skirts to put out the fire on him and shelter him from danger. Louis and 4 of the nobles died of their burns. Only one dancer, the furthest away, survived as he jumped in a cask of wine and hid under the fluid level until the flames went out.
Wild. Absolutely wild.
Eleanor, before I get to many questions that I have about this, can you give us a quick refresher on Charles I and France at the end of the 14th century?
Yeah, so Charles VI, you will...
Charles VI.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You'll remember him as the Mad King, right? Homeboy here is having a difficult time. He has bouts of psychosis, which mean that he is oftentimes incapacitated and unable to rule. He is the regent when the French get their asses kicked absolutely at the Battle of Agincourt. And he is the, presiding over everything when stuff is bad enough that Joan of Arc is like, okay, I've had enough. And I'm inspired by God to take care of this now. And so a part of the background information about this is he's incapacitated for huge periods of time, right? He will just be completely unable to rule. And so at those times, regency moves around from varying people at the court. Sometimes it's Queen Isabeau, but sometimes it's also the Duke of Orleans, right? Ha! So there's a lot of kind of toing and throwing and backing and forthing about who's going to be, the most powerful person at court. And the Duke of Orleans is absolutely in that mix. Which,
So why does anyone care enough about Queen's Lady in Waiting to have the king and 5 nobles do a dance about it? Like, why? Who cares?
Okay, so basically, like, the ladies in waiting have like the ear of the queen, right? And it's a very diplomatic role. And it is something where you kind of act as a go-between for various people. So you both, like, it's a really interesting kind of thing because dressing up as a dance troupe to do something for her, in theory, could be like a major sign of your respect. And also, it's very interesting dressing up as wild men to do this as well. Like, there's a whole lot of semiotics involved here. Let's just say that. So, they can kind of insult her in one way, but also be like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's a great honor. It's a great honor to do all of these things. So, what is going on here is like a very court politics based thing. So basically, it's a little way of trying to put someone who is perhaps a little too uppity in her place, if that makes sense.
Putting an uppity woman in her place.
Can't believe it. Can't believe this.
Thank God they were around to do this. So, like, okay, this is happening in 1393. The 100 Years' War has been going on for 50, 60 years at this point. Why are they doing this during the 100? Isn't there a fucking war on? What are you doing, man?
Why am I even fighting a war if I can't act like a stupid fop? What is even the point? What's the point of all this if I cannot fop around with my friends? That's what's up, Like, I mean, but that's kind of like part of it. Like, this is just rich people shit. Yeah. Rich people just are fucking wild, all right? It's like, well, there's hundreds of people dying in the mud over there. Like, your nephew Charles IV just had to sneak off a fucking battlefield, like, in disguise, trying to, like, what's fucking going on? It's like, I don't know. What is it? Actually, no. Yeah. I take it back. That was earlier than this. I just wanted to bring Charles IV up. Sorry, everybody. Different Louis. That was Charles. That was his uncle Charles. Anyway, whatever. I'm tired. But my point is that, partially this is just kind of what people do at court, especially in the late Middle Ages and then into the early modern period. There are rather a lot of masks, as we call them. So this is kind of like a standard part of court life. And the thing of it is, you kind of know that it's the king a little bit. There's a little bit of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, all of these are important people or they wouldn't fucking be allowed in, right? And you partially do it as a way, like the reason the king is involved is that it's like allowing them to let loose and they can like subvert expectations and then go, haha, 'twas me, the king all the time. And everyone goes, what? I can't believe it was the king. Whoa. And it.
No way.
And they go, that dancer was really good. It was the king. What? It's a thing that nobles do all the time. And they do it because they are really into spectacle. They are very, very into this kind of like producing big and awe-inspiring stuff to look at. It will become an increasingly large part of court life until it kind of like peaks in the 18th century, and some heads get chopped off, right? Because there's a lot of this going on.
Yeah, it's just fascinating, because like you got a king and nobles doing this, and like that is not how you normally think of kings and nobles acting. You think of them being more staid and reserved and everything like that, and so you just get this, and they're like, oh yeah, we're just gonna dance around, and then the king's brother like barges in with like a fucking
oopsie
torch, and he like he if he hadn't gotten close to them, it probably would have been fine, but he had to walk up and like try to check out the identity of who it was, and they were like caught him on fire and they burned to death. So I'm just gonna ask the question here: doesn't this all seem a bit pagan?
Okay, so that's the point of the wild man trope. Okay, so the wild
Right.
man trope, which is again incredibly popular in art in the late medieval period, you'll see a lot of, for example, tapestries with this as an art motif. And wild men kind of represent both very free sexual mores, wink, wink, because they're wild men,
You get it?
but it's also kind of a way of talking about like the inherent nobility of humans, so that there's this kind of naturalness. It's when they're kind of coming up with ideas of naturalness and talking about the natural state of men as opposed to the cultivated state of men. So there's part of it is the kind of sexual wildness and the fact that, the wild men are always portrayed as naked, but they're kind of covered in this hair and everything. So, which gives you some plausible deniability. You do be seeing titty though. Wild women do be flash and titty. Don't worry about that. So there is a way of kind of like talking about sexuality, but also saying like, oh, what about like the inherent nobility of all this? And so this kind of also is another reason that the king is involved in it, because like, as you say, you expect really rigid and proper things from kings and nobles, and it's a chance for them to let their hair down because they're like, what? It was just a play. Oh, we're just a dancing troupe.
We're just a bunch of bards.
Yeah.
So, really hard to completely keep the wraps on this sort of thing, because 4 nobles and the king's brother all died from it. So, like, what did the people think? I'm sure they had a perfectly measured response to finding out all of this.
Yeah, I think that the regular people's response to this was, "Are you being fucking serious?" Right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is such a like, you were out here toiling in the field. The English have just stolen your last pig, and you're like, "I'm sorry, what is happening?" So there was a like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. And then also, this is something that, for example, the Burgundians kind of take advantage of, and they're like, yeah, you see,
Right.
like, fuck those guys. They're just out here doing stupid shit and burning to death. Like, they're very silly.
Yeah.
They're very silly. Do not go to Paris. It's a very silly place, kind of a deal. So kind of like much is made of, perishing as a result of frivolity, and indeed as a result of the kind of sexuality here. So, like one of the big tortures in hell that you see for the lustful is burning. Right. And so like some hay was made of this by preachers, for example. So being like, yeah, you see, that's what happens when you're too sexy. You light on fire. Right.
Just too damn hot.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Amazing.
And like this is kind of like a part of the way that they think about sexuality. They see it as being like particularly hot. And so like Louis, the Duke of Orleans, does like, people are not impressed. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So where it's like, dude, did you just kill your brother? Right. Like, that's fairly intense. So he does suffer some quite, I would say, reasonable questions as a result of this. He's still fundamentally like, he's still a noble, right? But he already like the Parisians hated him. Okay. Parisians hated him already because they thought he was just like a playboy and a womanizer, right? And that he was just like spending all their money, right? Then after this, they're like, are you fucking joking? So he eventually then gets killed as a result of this. Now, he gets killed by John the Fearless, you might remember, our friend, but not until like 1407. Right. So it takes a while, but then basically when he gets killed, everyone is like, oh yeah, word. Like, to the point where John the Fearless was like, yeah, I killed him, and like, yes, I killed him, and he deserved to die, kind of deal. And everyone is like, yeah, word, okay. But I mean, which is also like brings things into like the open warfare thing.
Yes, he deserved to die, and I hope he burns in
hell.
in
Yeah,
hell.
basically. So, yeah, it definitely is a kind of turning point where everyone is like, homie, right? And he was already not well liked, is the point. So, you've lost Paris at this point. I'll say that.
Yep.
Although, sorry, I do remember now that Charles IV absolutely was involved in. I don't know. I'm so fucking all over the place. Charles IV absolutely was at the Battle of Agincourt. Sorry, everybody.
Too many Charleses, too many Louis, too many everyone's.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Agincourt. Or was it Crécy? God damn it.
No, he would have been at Crécy. Yeah,
it was Crécy. Yeah, like, look at this, guys. I have lost my grip on reality, and you are all the French waiters of listening to this show now. And it's the fucking French again. Yeah. It's the French again. But like, yeah, I gotta tell you, like, Louis is the one who takes the blame for this shit. Right? Everyone is like, what the fuck, bro? Although there is a kind of mild amount of like, well, that's what you get for being sexy. That also happens, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. That's the Balte Ardents. I don't fucking know what else to say about it. It's weird. It's weird that nobles were dancing. It's weird the king was dancing. It's really weird that he, like, I just find it so funny that like a woman's voluminous skirt was, they pulled the king out and a woman's voluminous skirt saved him, and
then he died.
And like he's like, I mean, they would have been saved so much. They honestly would have been saved so much trouble if he had died then instead of living for another,
like, honestly,
31, 33 years, something like that. Like, it's just like,
yeah, I mean, because God bless him, he had a hard time. And
he definitely had some issues, and like the people around him weren't helping things, but like,
it's like
he starts this war with the Burgundians and blah, and it's just like, well, cool.
Yeah, and he starts this war with the Burgundians because they kill his fucking useless brother, and he's like, now hang on a second.
He's like, only I get to kill my useless brother.
My brother might have
fires at the palace.
My brother might have almost killed me, but hang on. It's just like, what?
Hang on just a second.
What is happening? Like, what is happening in noble society? These people are fundamentally unserious. And I say that as someone who cannot even keep the Battle of Crécy and Agincourt straight in her head right now. So, yeah.
Exactly. Last thing for today is the Dancing Plague, or the Dancing Mania, or St. John's Dance, which I find funny because I guess St. John the Baptist, flopped around a lot when his head got cut off or something. I don't know. But yeah, this is an occasional social contagion that occurred sporadically in Europe from the 7th century, which is the earliest attested cases, to the 16th. Or 17th, one of the two, with most of them occurring later in that period within the territory of the Holy Roman Empire. Personally, I imagine they were all dancing like Elaine from Seinfeld, but that's neither here nor there. Eleanor, what the fuck?
Oh no, you're so right for that.
Like, I want to be clear that like some of these involve like 10 people, some of them involve 5 people, some of them involve tens of thousands of people and went on for months, like an extended fucking flash mob, if you remember that.
God, remember that? Yeah, whatever. Jesus.
Whenever that shit was popular.
Oh God.
Eleanor, what the fuck? Like, what is going on?
I mean, okay, so it's really interesting, right? Because the first one you get in the 14th century in Aachen, the original capital of Charlemagne's empire. But it becomes like just a thing that happens periodically. So like the biggest one that ever happens happens in about 1518 in Strasbourg. So it tends to kind of hit up Germanic type people, although the Alsatians, they're like sometimes they're French, sometimes they're German. They're always Alsatian, right? And they basically just lose their shit. And start dancing, right? Okay, so and this is not an unknown phenomena, because like we have like a Greek term for it, which is choreomania, which means like
which
dancing,
is a fucking awesome name, by the way.
So good, and Paracelsus is the one who came up with that one.
Nice.
So basically, there's like enough, like. We got like enough that people are like we need like a medical term for this. Like it's known enough that they're trying to kind of like bring this into like a physician's guide, right? So sometimes you get it connected to a saint. So sometimes it's like St. John's dance. Sometimes it is St. Vitus's dance, and basically they get called that because oftentimes they're dancing will end when they are taken to places that are dedicated to St. Vitus or dedicated to St. John the Baptist. So like you would pray to them and then eventually like it would stop. And
fantastic.
And they oftentimes break out around the feast day of St. Vitus, very specifically. So like this is like a specific way where these things kind of like happen. Now, can we be kind of like about that, right? Because his feast day is on the 15th of June. Just it's a nice little time to go dancing.
Yeah, it's nice out. Yeah.
If his feast day was in February, would we see quite so much dancing mania?
Probably.
One might ask, right? Like like who's having a dancing plague when it's snowing, right?
Yeah.
Like by the 17th century. They have decided that they're going to diagnosing it. So it's like they say that it is a thing that is called Sydenham's chorea, which is like a disorder where you kind of jerk around, like especially like the face, hands, and feet. But like I have a hard time buying that. I also don't like retrospective diagnosis. I'm kind of like, well, how the fuck do we know, right? So it's like, I'm like, whole villages of people, is it all had like this thing I've never heard of? Yeah, cool, right? So like that seems a bit weird. But yeah, it just kind of like crops up a lot. Like you have tiny little incidents earlier in the medieval period. Like here's one from the 7th century, here's like one from the 11th century, blah blah blah. But it like takes off in the 14th century, right? Yeah.
I do like one in the 11th century in Bernburg where they did it while it was cold out, and they disturbed, it was not very many of them, but they disturbed a Christmas Eve service. How dare you? How fucking dare you?
Like, we're trying to be somber.
It's cold. We forgot we're supposed to do these during the summer. Ah, shit.
Oh, god damn. Oops. Right? Yeah.
It's, I went down a rabbit hole.
Oh, it's easy.
When I started looking this up, because I was like, okay, like, what are we talking about here? Because is this like a flagellates thing where like a few people marched through town and there were onlookers and, maybe people were like, maybe we have sinned a little bit, or something like that. Or was this something else? And like, as we said, there were a couple times where it was, like 5 or 10 people and you're like, okay, they felt the need to dance it out for a few hours and they did it, and here we are. But then other times it's 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 and it goes on forever, and it spreads from Aachen to like Cologne and then into down into Italy and France and the Netherlands, and you're like, and like I looked up some of like what it might be, and a couple of the suggestions, one of them is ergot poisoning, which from what I could tell is when their cooking methods and the level of bread that they were eating and stuff like that, it would sometimes get mold and other junk in it, and we get some ergot in there. And the thing about ergot is, if you just take a little bit of it, it's only slightly poisonous, and it gives you hallucinogenic highs.
Yeah.
If you take a little bit more of it, you get really fucking sick and you die. And it was also suggested that it might have been tarantism, which is a word I learned while looking up while doing this, and that's poisoning from spiders and scorpions. But like
in Germany,
yeah, I guess the ergot poisoning maybe, but everything I read, I read an article and it was like, was it ergot poisoning? And they were like, well, I mean, maybe, but like that doesn't account
for the spread.
20,000 peasants didn't suddenly get ergot poisoning like in Aachen in the 1380s.
Yeah, it's not how it works.
On the same week, you know, I'm sure, I guarantee you tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of peasants had ergot poisoning throughout that time period, but not like that to where they all spontaneously erupt together. So like, do historians think these were like staged, or are they just like,
so
maybe people started copying it started out really as like one person with ergot poisoning, and then everybody else is like, hey man, they're dancing down, following them down the street while they got the boombox. Like, what's the
yeah. So like a little bit, the way that, as a social historian, the way that I relate to this is I'm not sure that they're doing it consciously. Right. Like I'm not saying that they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to like pretend that I'm caught up in this madness and I'm going to perform that I am. I think that they maybe honestly feel that they are kind of like swept up in this thing. But it tends to come up at times when people are having a really hard time, like in times of famine or when like particularly bad things are going on. It tends to affect women a little bit more than men.
Yeah.
So, this is a time when like the whole like, oh, I'm just a weak and frail woman and I'm just so easily swayed, and it happens in June when it's kind of nice out. We tend to see a little bit more, not always, that it sometimes happens in places that you're not from. So it's a little bit less likely to happen in your own goddamn hometown. Like, they'll be like, oh, Joan at it again or whatever. And a little bit more likely to happen if you're like away at market or something and you're like, wait, hey, because like no one can judge you. Right. And it's kind of an excuse to just kind of fuck around for a while,
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Like they've got a really hard life and just being like, woohoo, and like getting out after it is like, interesting, right? And there are all these kind of like weird little side effects. Like some people will say like, they couldn't stand the color red. And some people will say, oh, well, they love the color red. Some of them will say like, oh God, if they see pointed shoes, they freak out. Some will say that they like being hit. Some of them are like fully just having sex. Some of them are like going around naked. So kind of like one of the things that's going on here, I think, is that this is an excuse to act out, right? Like it's an excuse to be like, oh, I'm taking leave of social expectations and I'm behaving in this way. And I don't think that people do it on purpose, but I just think they go, oh, oops, oh, I guess we're doing okay, do you know that episode of The Simpsons where they go to Japan and then they're all having a seizure? And then Homer just walks in the room and goes, okay. And just like starts doing it, right? Like that's kind of like, yeah.
It doesn't, like, I mean, if it was coordinated, like, how is it coordinated? Like in the bigger ones, how is it coordinated between that many people with no one else knowing about it beforehand?
Yeah.
And like, but the thing about it is like the instances where it happens, like, there are a couple of times, like there was some in like 1373, 1374, which was the big one in Aachen that we talked about, and those stretched until like 1376. But other than that, they're like isolated by like years at a time, like 1418, 1428, 1518, the early 1600s, like, and some of them were big, like the outbreak in 1518 that you talked about, but then others of them were like one guy. There was one with like one guy, and another one where like a monk just danced himself to death in like Schaffhausen, I think.
Yeah, and see those ones,
yeah.
I'm more likely to say, okay, well, something's going on with them. Like there's like
Yeah,
something
yeah,
medical
yeah.
or something weird going on. When you have the huge ones,
Yeah.
to me, it's a little bit indicative of something else. And
Yeah.
you know, it also kind of ends up like becoming an excuse to kind of like leave a little bit, because like one of the big ways that they would treat it, quote unquote, is they would get like bagpipers in, and then the dancers would like follow the bagpipers, and then the bagpipers would like go to somewhere like a chapel of Saint Vitus or a chapel of Saint John, and they would like follow them. And so there's a really cute Bruegel the Younger painting that shows this, right? Yeah, which is very, very good. So it's like this is an excuse to kind of wander off in those cases. So it just really depends. I think when we're talking about 20,000 people, I think that that's much more of a social contagion kind of an issue. And I think when it's like one guy who dances himself to death, yeah, like something was going on there. And I think that's
like that. Yeah, that guy maybe did have ergotism, and he, you know, he's like, you know, and like, you know, it's, there was this article, and it's an older article from like the 70s that like I found, and it was talking about like a dancing outbreak at, I guess, Mulebeek or something like that. And they were talking about how in like the 1200s, like a bunch of children just danced and jumped for like 13 miles in between towns, and like they were all suddenly following like a Pied Piper legend.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just like, and like, I mean, I guess theoretically, like, you know, a bunch of kids could have been like, look, dude, we're all just going to do this, you know, we're going to freak the parents out. But kids don't do something for 13 fucking miles.
13 miles,
like,
yeah, like
that. Most kids don't have the attention span. Even kids that, you know, don't have any attention issues at all do not have the attention span to do something for 13 fucking miles.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, I want to go play, you know, whatever the fuck they played with back then. I don't know, stare at the sheep or whatever. But like, it, like,
there's a
you know, like,
there's another good Bruegel painting called Games Children Play that shows like and like one of them is just like a kid like poking some like poo with a stick, which makes me laugh every time.
He's right, man. He's right.
Kids love that.
Kids do like to poke shit with a stick.
It's true. But yeah, like, I mean, so here it's one of these things too, where like it might start off fun, but I think it kind of turns into a bit of a trance state, right? So it's kind of, then you're just caught up in it, and you know that is, you know, a well-known social phenomenon that you can just kind of be drawn into these things, and you know, in terms of like the dancing, quote unquote, like a lot of what is usually recorded is like there's a lot of jumping. Which is quite interesting.
I like the idea that like none of them were actually dancing, and everybody was just like, you know, walking around like just jumping, and you're just like, it would make more sense if you danced.
Yeah, like
they're just like jump around.
Yeah, like one of the big ways that they would like bring it in to stop them is they'd put things in front of them that they can't jump over. Like they'd go like get a big chair or something and be like, "Yeah, you can't jump over that, can you?" Like just kind of like break it up. Right, like,
we've sire, we've done as you bid. We have
brought the big chair.
We've put out the impassable fortress that they can't get past, and the king's like, you got out the beanbag chair, huh? They'll be
flopping,
running into that for hours.
Yeah,
we pile two of them together. They'll never get into the city again. Like, oh my god, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh man. You know, we're not so different. You know, we just,
so like real talk. Yeah.
Every once in a while, everybody enters into a social trance, and we all just kind of agree that things suck. And then sometimes, you know, you know, but before you have, you know, extreme mass communication, the ability to, you know, call the village down the way and be like, hey, you want to get together and do a big flash mob? And they're like, yeah, sure. And so before that, it was just peasants being like, life really sucks right now, and I don't want to work today. Fuck it. And it's time to dance. And then you're just like, oh, why? Either that or like, oh, another monk got into the ergot. Time for another dance party.
Woo!
And the church is like medieval Footloose, like thou shalt not dance. You know? Like, no, I want to.
But I want to dance. They're going out.
I'm so good at it. And, John Lithgow's like, no, thouest cannot, or whatever. Like, no, Dad, no. Yeah. Footloose. Yeah. Anyway, yep. There we go. Everybody remembers the movie Footloose. And if you don't, it's fun. Kevin Bacon is cool.
Yeah, check it out. Absolutely.
Movie. Yeah. Check out Footloose, a movie that I think came out when I was 1.
Check out that. That's Footloose, a brand new one out there. So check it out.
Yep. All the kids are talking about it.
Fingers on our pulse.
Yeah, I guess the last thing here is sounds a little. This sounds pretty pagan.
Oh
huh?
God, yeah,
Sounds a bit pagan.
Yeah, that's what. And the church is like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And they're not happy about it.
Now that if I was clergy, then I'd be like, "Fuck, the devil's coming back. Demon signs everywhere. The dark sign has occurred in the sky. We're all fucking doomed."
Oh yeah,
and hell yeah.
Like they go in there on the exorcisms.
Now that,
like,
not good. I do not support the church exercising people like randomly, but like that makes sense. Like that is like, okay, 10,000 people started dancing. I need to figure out that's big demon. We got to bring in the big dogs.
Yeah, exactly. So, sometimes that's one of the ways that it's solved. And which kind of like, breaks people out of it. And they're like, oh, church is mad at me. But it also kind of.
I guess I do want to work today. I gotta go.
But also, like, you gotta say that it's it also kind of like plays into like being allowed to do it.
Yeah, true.
Right,
true.
because it's like, the devil made me do it. Not my fault.
The devil briefly made me do it, but I'm good. Went to church, said my Hail Marys and all that, and good to go now.
Yep.
Oh yeah. That is definitely weird. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I think next time will be our last episode. We're going to do a few quick hitters of just random weird stuff. Probably talk about the Theodosian walls because, if you're going to end a series on weird medieval shit, you might as well end it in Constantinople.
Can't stop, won't stop.
And and then after that, we're going to have a couple of interviews with some really cool guests. We're going to talk to Paul M.M. Cooper, who's written a book and runs the podcast Fall of Civilizations. It's really good. We're going to talk about medieval civs falling and stuff like that. And then we're going to talk to Everett from the Age of Napoleon podcast. We're going to talk to him about a little about the Napoleon movie and about the Napoleon's association with the Middle Ages and stuff like that. So it'll be really cool. And we'll get to we'll get to hear two experts. Get to Eleanor talk to both of them, and that'll be really cool. Eleanor, what I know you've been filming and everything, but what's going on with you?
Lately? Oh God, so much. So the thing that everybody can have right now is I've got a blog up this week, which I somehow wrote on trains. So go check that out over at going-medieval.com. It's about how I can't sell my book around here and how I had to spend a bunch of money to get a hold of a picture of some very lustful sinners in Bologna. So I spent money on it. Please go read it.
But your book is front-facing outward at famous bookshops, like
Shakespeare and Company
in Paris.
I can't fucking believe that. Like seriously, I was just like walking around with the stupidest smile on my face after I heard that. But it's out in paperback. You could go get it at Shakespeare and Company if you're in Paris. It'll make you feel good. But yeah, I'm filming a new show for History Hit, which will be out in June. I'll let you all know when it happens. But it's tentatively titled "Meet the Normans." 2 episodes. One about like the foundation of the Norman dynasty in France, and the second one is going to be about William the Conqueror, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it should be fun. I got to climb up onto the top of Mount Saint Michel. I got to see the Bayeux Tapestry without any people.
Really?
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah, like I was up on the roof, bitch. Like I was up on like I was like up on the lace staircase. I was like up there being like, look at them all down there, all normal. With their regular,
look at all those peasants
not
down
like
there.
me. I was fully like immediately.
Yeah.
You let me onto the roof of the church, and I'm like, am I better than everyone?
You're like, I wouldn't go mad with power. 10 seconds later,
100%. I'm like, I'm talking like Sephiroth up there. It's like it's too much. So yeah, I'll absolutely shout when that is out. It's good stuff. Otherwise, I am on the socials as per usual, as at Going Medieval.
Yeah, and you can find me, Luke is Amazing, socials. People's History of the Old Republic's my old show. You can find it. Yeah, that's all that's going on with us. But as always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.